Emily's legs trembled as she stumbled along the narrow mountain trail. The sun was high in the sky, casting harsh light on the rocks and dry grass. She had been walking for hours, maybe even days, and her body was screaming at her to stop. But she had nowhere to go. The road behind her was full of memories she wanted to forget, and the road ahead, she only hoped would lead her to safety. Her hand pressed against her stomach instinctively. A small, growing life inside her, and fear tightened its grip. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to." Her steps faltered. She could feel the weight in her body, the exhaustion, the hunger, the uncertainty. The mountains that once seemed majestic and full of promise now loomed over her like silent, unyielding judges. She stumbled again, catching herself on a jagged rock, and then her knees gave way. Emily fell forward, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Pain shot through her abdomen, and she gritted her teeth. I'm pregnant," she whispered, barely audible, her voice trembling. And then, almost immediately, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the dusty ground. The mountain air was thin, and each breath felt like a battle. Emily tried to sit up, but her strength failed her. Tears blurred her vision, as fear threatened to consume her. She thought of the life growing inside her, and a pang of guilt struck her. She didn't know how to protect it. She didn't even know how to protect herself. She had no one. The thought of being alone in these mountains made her chest ache. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "Someone, help me." Not far down the trail, Luke rode his horse with the ease of a man who knew every stone, every turn, every slope. He had been checking the fences along the ridge, making sure nothing in his herd had wandered off. The mountains were quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wildlife. Then, a faint sound reached his ears, a weak, trembling voice calling out. He stopped immediately, straining to listen. There it was again. A fragile whisper that made his heart tighten. "I'm pregnant." Luke's horse shifted uneasily beneath him. He looked around, scanning the trail ahead, and then he saw her. A small figure slumped on the dusty path, her hair tangled, and her face pale. Without thinking twice, he urged his horse forward, leaping from the saddle in one fluid motion as he reached her side. Hey, you're all right," Luke said gently, his deep voice calm but firm. Emily tried to lift her head, but her strength was gone. Luke's arms moved quickly and carefully, scooping her up with a strength that didn't startle her, but instead gave her a strange, immediate sense of safety. He could feel how light she was, how fragile, and it made him instinctively protective. "I've got you," he said again. Emily's eyes fluttered open, filled with fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but her lips barely moved. Luke looked down at her and smiled reassuringly, letting her feel that she wasn't alone. Carefully, he carried her along the trail, choosing the path that would be easiest for both of them. He had seen mountain trails claim stronger people than her, and he wasn't about to let it happen. The journey back to his cabin wasn't easy. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the rocky slopes. Luke's arms burned with effort, but he didn't let it show. He murmured softly to Emily as he walked, just small words to comfort her. "We're almost there. Don't worry, you're safe now." Emily, though exhausted, clung to his voice. There was something steady about it. Something that reminded her that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. By the time they reached Luke's cabin, the sun was touching the horizon. The log structure was modest but strong, surrounded by a few simple fences and the open mountains beyond. Luke gently laid Emily on a cot he had quickly pulled into the cabin. She felt warmth from the fire he had lit, the smell of wood smoke filling the room. It was foreign and comforting at the same time. Luke knelt beside her and checked her carefully. She had cuts on her hands and knees from the rocks. Her clothes were dusty and torn, but she was alive. That was what mattered. He brought her a warm cloth to clean her face and hands, and a bowl of water to sip. Emily's hands shook as she reached for the water, and he waited patiently, letting her regain strength at her own pace. I don't know what to do," Emily admitted softly, her voice breaking. She finally looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes, and felt her resolve crumble. "I don't know how to. I can't. I'm alone." Luke's eyes softened. "You're not alone anymore. I'll help you. I promise." He didn't make any assumptions, didn't rush her, didn't try to force words she wasn't ready to say. He simply sat there, steady, a presence she could rely on. Hours passed. Emily rested while Luke went about preparing simple food broth with some vegetables he had stored, bread baked earlier in the week. He returned with a bowl, careful not to startle her. "Here, eat a little. You need your strength." Emily nodded faintly, taking small bites as Luke stayed nearby. She hadn't expected kindness, and the sheer normalcy of it surprised her. By nightfall, the cabin was quiet, except for the crackle of the fire and Emily's shallow breathing. Luke made a bed beside hers, not out of impropriety, but so he could hear if she needed anything during the night. The mountain could be dangerous, and he wasn't about to let anything happen to her under his watch. Emily, exhausted and comforted in a way she hadn't been in years, finally let her eyes close and drift into sleep. Luke stayed awake a little longer, staring into the fire. He thought about the woman resting just a few feet away. She was frightened, carrying a life she hadn't planned for. Yet, she was alive. And he realized, in that quiet moment, that his life had changed. He had never been one to take responsibility for someone else, yet here she was. Her trust had been placed in him, and he would honor it. Outside, the mountains loomed silent and cold. Inside, a small fire burned, casting warmth and light over two people who had found each other in the vast wilderness. One carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. The other carried the strength and calm of experience. And in the quiet of that cabin, a fragile sense of hope began to grow. For Emily, the road ahead was still uncertain. She didn't know what the future held, how she would care for herself, or the baby growing inside her. But she had survived the first step, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the whisper of safety. She could trust this stranger, this mountain cowboy who had carried her from the edge of despair, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a new beginning. And for Luke, the mountains had always been his world, unchanging and predictable. But now, with Emily in his cabin, things were shifting. He didn't yet know how this life would unfold, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her. He would carry her through whatever came next, just as he had carried her along that treacherous trail. The night deepened, the wind brushing against the cabin walls, and Emily slept. In her dreams, there was a hint of peace, something she hadn't felt in years. And somewhere in the quiet mountains, two lives had collided, bound by trust, care, and the promise of a new beginning. Morning came slowly in the mountain valley. Sunlight filtered through the small window of the cabin, casting warm streaks across the wooden floor. Emily stirred in her cot, blinking against the light. Her body ached, but the pain was softer than the fear she had carried for so long. She looked around the cabin, taking in the simple furnishings, the fire still glowing faintly, and then her eyes fell on Luke. He was sitting in a chair by the wall, polishing a set of tools for the farm, completely focused, as if he hadn't noticed the time pass. "Morning," Emily whispered, her voice rough from sleep. Luke looked up and smiled, a calm, gentle smile that made her chest feel lighter. "Morning. How are you feeling?" Emily shrugged, trying to find words. "Better, I think. Hungry. That's good. Eat something. You need strength." He reached over and brought her a plate of warm food. Simple but nourishing, eggs, bread, and some fruit. Emily took the plate with shaking hands. But Luke's steady presence made her feel safe enough to eat. She didn't rush, taking small bites, savoring the warmth and the normalcy. For the first time in a long while, she felt a little hope. The days that followed were filled with quiet routines. Emily recovered slowly, and Luke stayed by her side, helping her with even the smallest tasks. He showed her how to care for herself in the mountains, how to gather clean water from the stream, how to move safely over the rocky trails, and how to keep warm at night. Each day, Emily felt her strength returning, and with it, a sense of trust that she had long denied herself. Luke never asked questions about her past. He listened when she spoke, without judgment, offering advice when she seemed unsure. Emily found herself telling him things she had never shared with anyone, the fears, the mistakes, the shame she carried. And Luke, in return, shared stories of his own life in the mountains, of the lonely nights and the hard work, the sense of freedom, and the responsibility he felt to protect what mattered to him. Their bond grew quietly, strengthened by patience, trust, and small acts of care. One afternoon, Emily sat outside the cabin, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. She could feel the baby moving, small but insistent. A smile spread across her face, despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I don't even know his or her name yet," she whispered to herself. Luke came out from the cabin, carrying a small basket of herbs he had gathered from the mountains. He crouched beside her, placing the basket gently on the ground. "Morning," he said. "I found some chamomile for tea. It will help you rest tonight." Emily looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you for everything." Luke shrugged, though his eyes held warmth. "You'd do the same for me if the roles were reversed." Days turned into weeks. Emily's belly grew, and with it, her understanding of what life could be like in this quiet valley. She learned to cook simple meals, to sew and mend her clothes, and even to help Luke with chores around the cabin. Luke, in turn, showed patience she had never expected. He never rushed her, never demanded anything, and always encouraged her when she doubted herself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily sat on the porch watching the horizon. "Luke," she began hesitantly. He turned to her, curious. "Yes? I was scared before, scared of what was coming. But now, I feel safe. I feel like, maybe, I can do this." Luke nodded slowly. "You can. And you won't have to do it alone." He paused, looking out over the valley. "We'll figure it out together." Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief. She had carried so much alone for so long, and now, someone shared the weight. It was a strange, wonderful feeling she had almost forgotten existed. As the weeks passed, Emily's belly grew round and strong, and the time for the baby's arrival approached. Luke prepared the cabin carefully, setting up a clean, warm space with blankets and supplies. He even spoke with the nearby mountain community, quietly letting them know a woman needed help, though he did not reveal too much. Emily's nerves often made her restless, but Luke's calm presence was always there to steady her. One night, the first signs came. Emily woke to a sharp pain, her breath coming in short gasps. She called out softly, and Luke was immediately at her side, steady and reassuring. "It's all right," he said. "We've prepared for this. I'll be right here with you." The hours that followed were long and tense. But Luke's patience never wavered. He fetched water, held her hand, and whispered encouragement, reminding her that she was strong, that she could do this. Emily's fear ebbed and flowed, but Luke's presence gave her courage. Every contraction, every cry, was met with gentle reassurance. "You're doing great," he said, again and again. Finally, As dawn painted the mountains in soft gold, Emily felt the final push. Luke guided her carefully, holding her hand, helping her focus on each moment. And then, with a final effort, a small, crying life entered the world. Emily's tears of exhaustion quickly turned into tears of joy as she held her baby close. Luke knelt beside them, overwhelmed with gratitude and awe. "It's beautiful," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Luke smiled, a wide, unrestrained smile. "Yes, both of you." He gently brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. His eyes filled with something deep and unspoken, a promise of protection, care, and love. In the days that followed, Emily and the baby recovered, and Luke's presence never faltered. The three of them settled into a quiet, gentle routine. Emily learned to trust herself, to trust her instincts as a mother, and to trust Luke completely. The mountains, once intimidating and lonely, now felt like home. She could walk outside without fear, knowing she had someone who would always be there. One afternoon, Emily watched her baby sleep in a small cradle by the fire. She reached out, touching the soft cheeks gently. "We made it," she whispered. "We really made it." Luke came out from the cabin, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked down at them, then at Emily, and then at the baby. "Yes," he said quietly, "and we'll keep making it, every day." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. The fear and uncertainty of the past seemed distant now, replaced by warmth, safety, and hope. She had come to the mountains alone, carrying fear and an uncertain future. But now, she was here with a child, with someone who cared for her, and with a new life waiting to be lived. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, silent and strong, yet somehow softer now, as if they, too, acknowledged the life and love within the cabin. Emily felt a quiet gratitude for the unexpected path that had brought her here, to a new beginning she had never dared to imagine. And Luke, standing by the window, watching Emily and the baby, knew that life had changed forever. He had carried her through the mountains when she could not go on alone, and now he would carry them both through every trial that came next. Together, they had found hope, trust, and a home in the wild, beautiful mountains. The valley was no longer just a place of rugged survival. It had become a place of life, love, and new beginnings. And in the quiet of that mountain home, Emily, Luke, and the child they now shared faced the future together, strong, hopeful, and unafraid.